Hey, everybody. Welcome to week 207. And yes, Adam, the guy that he's like a Rain Man. Like he's a whiz with numbers. He's probably the best tax strategist I've met ever. And like, dude, can you not count to 206 last week? Come on, man. I mean, I was on vacation and I knew it was 206.
I mean, it
So
does truly kind of blend together. The milestones you can remember, but
that's
when
true.
so
That's
I'll
true.
defend
I,
I'll
I
defend
just
him a
like
little bit.
keeping a running tally, you
Yes.
know, because I think it's funny. I mean, I just think it's hilarious that we thought, a couple of weeks of this and then we'll get on. And little did we know. But hopefully we're providing value to everybody. So that is our hope. That is our aim. And before we move in, like I know Jack Santinello, so I was going to say Jack Cliff Clavin Santinello because he is really good with all kinds of interesting trivia that you would never know about. But before we do that, I just want to say on our topic today, where we're talking about various succession plans, all right? And if you're not thinking about it, you're asleep at the wheel if you own a place, because there are no guarantees for tomorrow. I know too many, and so does Jack, stories where people thought, oh, tomorrow, and they're planning and planning and planning, and they haven't figured out what in the world they're going to do with this company. And they're responsible for many families, not just their own. And then many families are deeply impacted by an untimely death or taken out of the saddle because of some sort of debilitation or whatever. And it impacts a whole lot of people in a very negative way if you are not paying attention. The other thing that I'll say, and Jack, I'd love to have you join in on this before Adam chimes in here too, but I did a lot in the mergers and acquisitions world in private equity. And I lived through the three largest bank acquisitions in history at the time under Nations Bank. Then we bought Barnett. Then we bought Boatman's, then Barnett, then Bank of America. And what I've seen is everybody completely discounts the cultural nuances and the difficulties that go with a merger, which I don't believe that there is such a thing. Somebody acquired somebody. Somebody's got a dominant culture that will win. But this notion of cultural compatibility, that's the thing that is the wrecking ball. It's always the wrecking ball. It's always discounted, like always. Oh, it's going to be great. The number of guys say it's going to be great. And the people that are exiting, maybe it's going to be great if that's all they're looking out for themselves. But that's why I think today's topic is really, really important, which is on what are your options in succession planning? And like if you wanted to do an internal succession, hey, okay, so my kids don't want it. They're not capable, but maybe you've got a key person or two or three or a management team, ideally, that could be groomed to be able to take over so that they can continue to grow it. What are your options? So we're going to go deeper into that. But I would like you to expand a little bit more on that, Jack, as far as here's my question to you. From a percentage standpoint, now I realize most deals are not internal succession, probably. Most deals are probably private equity, a strategic, something like that, where there's an acquisition or a merger from the outside that happens. But if my hypothesis or if my assumption is correct, that the bulk of them are private equity, strategics, et cetera, acquisitions versus internal succession. What I want to know is from a percentage standpoint of success, you take the bucket of private equity acquisitions, strategic acquisitions, etc., which has less fallout on the internal culture and the people of the company where the owner or the founder or the entrepreneur exits, which has a greater impact, or which has greater negative impact, the PE strategic side or an internal succession? I'd just like your thoughts.
Okay, so negative impact to whom? The who remains, in the culture
Yes,
that
the
remains.
culture of the entrepreneur that sold.
Okay, so you know what my answer is, right?
It
It
depends.
depends. And the reason being is and the reason why it depends is because what did this founder do? What is the culture? And what is the expectation of culture by the new owners? And so, we as attorneys and CPAs spend a lot of time dealing with the objective, dealing with the numbers, dealing with the words on the paper that say who is going to be responsible for what post closing and those kind of things. And so, there needs to be a deeper dive into the culture, with respect to an outsider coming in and purchasing. An insider, I would say there's more success, probably statistically, with an insider taking over and moving forward, so long as they have the skills, capabilities, the trust of the people that are there. So
Yeah,
if it is, well, okay, he's never going to be as good as his dad, kind of thing, and we're just stuck with it and we'll just roll with it and hopefully things will get better, that's a
yeah,
poor attitude. But if it is, okay, we see that this child, and many times it is a child that was going to work with mom or dad at some point, then becomes an employee of the company, and then the readily apparent successor to the business. And you can see that this person has been groomed appropriately and it fits in with the culture. So that's not to say that if a outside investor, a PE firm, whomever is coming in to acquire, that they're successful all the time. But the ones that we see which are not successful are the ones that do not either understand or appreciate the culture that's already there that they're acquiring. And then even if they know what's there, they have a desire to make a change. And in their minds, somewhat confidently, maybe arrogantly, they think that they can come in and their culture is so much better that, of course, the acquired company and people will embrace our wonderful culture. And, it comes down to stupid things like, okay, well, you used to use this form, now we want you to use this form. Or you were reporting to this person, now we want you to report to this person who reports to this person who reports to. So, the internal bureaucracy that is created when you create something larger potentially, all under the auspices of, well, it is more orderly and efficient to have this process go this way. And because that, but that's all part of the culture. So it's a long-winded way of answering your question about to say that it depends, because it has to be, the good marriages are the ones that acknowledge what is on either side, and what they anticipate it looking like after the marriage, and they have to be rowing in the same direction. And you cannot have, and you've seen this in your M&A world, and as Adam has, that when you have just the David versus Goliath, and it's going to be from top down, this is how we're going to change, and it's going to permeate and become part of the blood of the new people, that doesn't work. So
yeah. Oh, you gave such a really good, it depends, but you're right, it does, because it's not, oh, well, hey, it's an internal transfer, so it's going to be great. But if it's Richie Rich taking over daddy's thing and the people don't love or respect Richie Rich, disaster. It's disaster. But yeah, you nailed it. Cultural compatibility is a big deal. But let's talk about, now that we got, man, Adam in a button-down shirt, I just don't know what to do with this. What's up?
Yeah, I had to make an impression, so I felt like t-shirt was not going to be the appropriate apparel for that. So there you go. And I was hoping to actually be back in a t-shirt in my home office, but the meeting went an hour longer than I expected. So apologies for being late, Gary.
No, no worries, man. Yeah, you get a hall pass. So we're going to talk about nuances, pros, cons, options, and trying to simplify. Okay, I really would like to preserve the culture. I think I've got some key people. And this is kind of the tactic that we're taking at BGW. We do not want to sell outside at all. We want to groom the next generation and have them take over. So, and we've looked at ESOPs, and that may still be an option at some point, but other things. But let's simplify as much as possible. Here are some of the options. Here are some of the, be aware of this. This sounds good, but watch out for that. So, we could start with ESOPs. That we've talked about it in the past. But let's talk a little bit about, since we did go down that path, Adam.
Mhm.
What drives somebody to do that? What does that mean? What do you give up? What do you get, etc.?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. And it's funny, ESOPs were pretty popular, and then they fell out of favor for a little bit, and they're coming back into popularity again as an item. And an interesting thing associated with that, when we were thinking about the topic for this week, I think it's going on 3 weeks ago, maybe. 60 Minutes had a segment with KKR, which is the big private equity firm, that, while they while what they did was not an ESOP with one of their target companies, it was very ESOP like. And they said, hey, we just bought this company, but guess what, Jack? I own part of it too as an employee here. So we're all gonna win when we flip this company, 5 years from now. And you're actually starting to see some, I don't know if you've done a deal yet, Jack, where the actual vehicle for a private equity firm to buy is an ESOP. We've had a few instances of those letters of intent come across our desk recently. But just, to back up a second, what's happening in an ESOP, employee stock ownership plan or program, whichever you're going to use the P for, but it's basically, it's the equivalent of the 401k bought the company. That's like the simplest way to dumb it down, to say the 401k plan bought the company. So the employees don't own it. What the employees are participants in a retirement plan, that the primary asset of the retirement plan is the company. And the seller, the seller is the old owners. So, typically either they got, either the company owes them money now, or alternatively, bank finance all transaction, doesn't matter. But they make the most sense for owners when, they're willing to finance, part of the transaction. They want to preserve the culture and feel like they have a pretty good management team in place. And then lastly, they still want to work there, but they don't want to work for Timmy, the private equity analyst, you know, or Joey, the you know, the VP of the broom closet that, now is running Jack's new division that was just acquired by Shit Corp. So it's like, hey, you want to still work there, but you still kind of, you still want to be the boss. What I can say is, like, even though there has to be a trustee and an independent board, I can't think of a BGW client that's converted an ESOP where the CEO and the management team isn't still in charge, in terms of what's actually happening, with some good accountability, but not like, you need to call me before you buy a new copier, level of accountability. Right. So they're good. They're really great from that perspective, with extremely limited downsides, associated with them in terms of what the downsides of going to an ESOP are, because it does, you can always sell later. New Belgium Brewery went ESOP, and then I want to say like 2 years later, the ESOP sold to like InBev or AB South Africa, or whatever they're called these days. But so you can be an ESOP and then ultimately sell at a later date if you want. But honestly, the only downsides is, first off, they only seem to make sense for companies that are about 20 employees or more. So you have to have some size for them to make sense. And then the only other part that doesn't make sense either is hard to get around, is that you have to be super fair. So like whoever's working for you in the ESOP on day one, that's how they get stock. So secretary's getting this much, Jack's getting this much, Gary's getting this much, and I don't have a lot of variability that I can have in how I do that. And I don't have a lot of variability in how I can award stock going forward. So it could be you get in a situation where, Patty, the secretary, actually owns more of the company than the new strategic hire that you just brought in. So you still have to have, kind of side plans that exist for executive awards. So it doesn't cure all that piece of it. I think the only other downside that we've seen, and I mean, this gets into the whole theme of employee incentives in the first place, is that, until people see track records of actual payouts, like I retired and I actually got paid $1 million and I never thought that I would get paid $1 million when I did this thing. Like the whole crux of the 60 Minutes article is they interviewed people that had just been paid and it exceeded their wildest expectations. So it's like, of course they were freaking happy, because here's like a guy that's massively in debt. Between him and his wife, they both make $100,000, in total, and they just got, 5x their annual salary, as a payout. It's like, yeah, hell yeah, they're singing its praises. But what do you think they thought in the initial presentation? The same thing that every employee thinks upon the initial presentation. What is this, and how am I going to get screwed?
Yeah.
So like, there's the punchline is, it doesn't matter what you do, nothing solves for that other than actually paying something out.
Yeah.
I call that suspicious paranoia. There's a term I made
Yeah.
that up, but yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. The subliminally avert. You mentioned that lack of variability, which is really important. And for anybody that missed the 2 episodes that we had with Kevin Monahan, the graphic was with golden handcuffs. There were two of them, but it was on retention strategies, because there are some available retention strategies that you can dovetail in with the confines of an ESOP, that you can reward key people that doesn't have to meet the same standards, if you will, of an ESOP. Kevin Monahan. If you haven't watched that one, watch it. Look it up, and if you need connection with Kevin Monahan, we're happy to do that, and we don't get spiffed on the back end. It's just, we really dig what he's doing. Yeah, that's a really good overview. Anything you would add to that, Jack?
So to your just comment right now, the significant distinction between retention and incentive plans, and the psychology behind that we talked about in those prior sessions, that, okay, are you want to build a retention program that may look like an incentive program, but it's the way that you put it together, because this, I look at an ESOP as a retention mechanism versus incentive, but it operates as both. So you see people who, you have to be willing to jump on the bandwagon, and you have to like the bandwagon that you're, already an employee of. Or if you're coming in from the outside and you see, okay, there's this opportunity, do I like what I see? Do I like where the company is going, that I'm going to invest in the company beyond my time? Now I am deferring, again, it's all a matter of perspective. I am deferring cash for the benefit of becoming an owner in this business. So you turn compensation, liquid compensation, into somewhat illiquid. And especially in small companies, is there going to be a buyer? What are the restrictions and those kind of things? But also, as Adam's talking about, kind of the 5x payout, the company has to have the money. And so there's a term, repurchase liability is, okay, so what liabilities, as you continue to build this and offer stock to someone, what is the repurchase liability as it increases? And it'll ebb and flow, because obviously if you have people retire, then there's an obligation typically to sell it back, because you want active employees that are not waiting around and clipping a coupon. So, but then the company has this responsibility to pay out. So there's all these competing factors depending on your perspective as employer or employee. And interestingly, Adam is correct that usually the people who are running the company before are the ones that are running it now. But now perhaps you have empowered others to have a voice. And sometimes you do have to give them some power in order to get people to buy into an ESOP type program. So you're also giving up some of that authority to make certain decisions on a larger scale that have an impact to a wider range of people now. So
yeah, that's good. I like the simplicity of how you did talk about it. The one thing that I think I would add is there is a significant cost on the front end in setting it up. Figure out what was it that we were looking at, Adam? It was about 150 grand.
Yeah, but I mean, I knew that was going to blow up. Let me give another data point. I don't care what you get told. We haven't had a client yet who's landed this plane for less than 400 grand.
Yeah, there you
I mean,
go.
I know I know what your experience has been, Jack, but between like everything, 400 grand was the cheapest we've seen.
yeah, it's an expensive process, and that's why you have to have people that believe in it. And so, to your point of, doing what I'm doing now, right, and just crossing my arms and saying, what's the catch? What, and so you because you become an owner of a company that now has spent this ton of money to get this program up and running, so it has a direct impact on you as an employee now, to be an employee owner essentially moving forward. But yes, there's a cost. And then I believe that, the ability to, I don't want to say manipulate, but to determine and put subjectivity into what the value of the company is, I think is somewhat restricted, because I think it has to be objective through an appraisal process. So the blue sky goodwill number that people make up when they're going through an arm's length transaction, that you're paying for the hard assets, but then you're paying for the goodwill, the reputation, all these other intangibles. I'm sure that would be factored in the true appraisal, but it becomes more objective, I think, to be qualified plan, right? So but
Yeah.
I'm confirm if that's true. I think
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, every year there's got to be an annual audit and an annual appraisal, and it's funny because like it's not. So that's a continuing cost, and I can speak from the experience of dealing with the appraisers. They're freaking thorough. Like they're taking the we don't want to overstate something very seriously. Like it to the point where I'm like, well, damn, I mean, that's, being pretty conservative. I'll give you an example. Like we had, you like, because it's actually relevant to to one of our topics that we talk about, the employee retention tax credit, the appraiser wanted to record a contingent liability in the event that the company were audited for their ERTC and they had to give all the money back.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, and that would have been millions in this particular case. I'm like, well, I mean, that seems pretty like, and you know, that's a lot, you know.
You know,
It's like, when are you done that? When are you done then? Like, you got to leave that in the books for like 8 years. Like, when are we, when are we going to call that done?
yeah.
But that's how seriously they took the job. I mean, they're, you know, trying to uncover every stone.
Well, and there is a lot of liability there because I know of one in particular where there were lawsuits afterwards, after a transaction. And I also know that I've got a friend that bought a company out of ESOP. He was on the board for a dozen years. He was the only outside and board member. It was a family thing, and they were kind of probably abusing it under the letter of the law, but they were abusing it more, you know, and so he cared about the company, he cared about the people, and he ended up buying it. But there are like no joke deadlines. Like he had to have the money by such and such a time, no ifs, ands, or buts, or the thing like forever is blown up. It was just really amazing to hear and see some of those things, because it's like, it's not like a typical negotiation. There are ironclad rules in place that are no joke. So I think your point of the auditor being like really strict, that's in keeping with what I've seen in that world.
Right.
Let's talk about, all right, that 400 grand cheap seats, you know, like, wow, we got a really good deal for 400 grand. That may be scaring the life out of some people. Oh, oh, that's a good question before we move on. Randall, always good to see you on here. He says, how does that play into the Corporate Transparency Act with an
So, you
ESOP?
know, it's the owners of the company are the owners of the company. And so who are the beneficial owners? It's so an ESOP doesn't change the nature and the personality of the ownership. It's stock. You are an equity owner, you are a beneficial owner. So all of the CTA requirements would apply. Which,
Yeah.
you know, yeah. So
At the same time, practically, you know, most ESOPs are going to be larger than the reporting threshold, you know, so you'd have that other side of the equation in terms of like the company's bigger than the reporting threshold.
sure.
But if it's under, and typically somebody's like the secretary is now issued stock, everybody that's a
Yeah.
stockholder of the ESOP has to be named, I would think.
Yeah, and it's not, I wouldn't think unmanageable by, okay, you know, I think, and hopefully clients are doing what we're doing, which is keeping track of things and, you know, storing who were the owners last year. We are not offering services to go and ask at the beginning of every year of every client, have things changed. You know, we're very clear that that is not our responsibility. Even if we filed the initial filing, we have no ongoing responsibility to update it unless you ask us to update it and provide us with the information that we need, like a copy of a passport or driver's license and those kind of things. So, but yeah, and I want to bring up one other point on the opposite end of things, which is that for me, and I've said this several times in the past several years, over the plus 200 weeks that we've been doing this, that if what number are we at? We should ask Adam what number we're at.
207.
Yeah. No, I'm just messing with you.
I know.
2 bajillion.
So the if you a client has to convince me to give stock away. And the reason being is that I've had too many conversations over the course of my career for a few decades that it is in the story, it's the same story I told before. So hypothetically, which is real, 1991, 4 fraternity brothers get together, they form a company, does really well for a few decades. One of the 4 just kind of goes off the rails in a lot of ways, but including running the multi-million-dollar division of the company that he's supposed to be running. And they want to get rid of him. And there is a buyout provision in the shareholders agreement that they drafted back in the 90s when they didn't have anything. And they're like, oh, okay, this form looks good. It seems reasonable. Percentage, yeah, okay. I mean, any percentage of nothing is pretty much nothing, right? So no, didn't even think about it.
Right.
And then you fast forward, and then so it happens, and it is the question to me is, do we really have to pay that ton of money to him or her? And the answer is yes. You signed a contract a few decades ago, several years ago, and so yes. And then but we've been paying for the company car and the boondoggles to Vegas and this and that. It's like, okay, well, that's just kind of the way it is. Now, I'm not down on giving people stock because I strongly believe that there is a good purpose for that, which is skin in the game, which is if you can't pay someone cash or bonus money, then this is a good alternative to incentivize, to retain, and move forward with the business and grow it. So, but I make sure that clients who are considering giving away stock so easily that they consider what the consequences might be down the road. So that is just kind of my free legal guidance and putting on my counselor's hat for a few moments outside of legal, which is be thinking about those kind of things, because you do have options that I assume we'll continue to talk about. So
yeah. Well, that's a perfect segue into stock appreciation rights. And there are probably more than we talked about, but and whether we get through all of these today or not, I don't care. I just want to keep working through some of the options and making it as simple in plain English as possible. So let's talk about stock appreciation rights and what are some of the options within that, nuances, pros, cons.
Yeah, Adam's a big fan of these because it what you're basically doing in that scenario is the equivalent of what the KKR story did on 60 Minutes, which is basically saying, Gary, the company's worth $5 million today, and it's going to be based on your hard work that you're putting in here. It's going to be worth 10 million in the next couple of years, and we want to share some of that with you. So basically, you're saying the stock's worth $1 today, you get a share in the upside if it goes beyond the dollar. But I get the dollar, but we get a share in the upside on anything that appreciates. And you can have it be just 1-to-1 share, pro rata share. You get the first, like, you skin the cat a lot of ways in terms of like how that split exists on the appreciation right itself. I think that that model works the best when there's like a triggering item, meaning like, Gary, I'm 50. I want to sell the company in 5 years. Let's do this together. So that there's a goal line, that's gonna happen, associated with it. Versus like, hey, Gary, I'm gonna give you stock appreciation rights, and I'm 30, and I have no idea what the hell I'm gonna do. Well, you know what those stock appreciation rights are worth to you? Zero. I mean, like, they are worth something, but they're worthless, effectively. So I think stock appreciation rights work best And again, these are legal contracts, you know, like it's like you legally did something that you're obligated to do something with. But you just didn't give stock certificates, you know, but you did enter into a non-discretionary thing, meaning like you did it. It's non-discretionary, not willy-nilly like, hey, I'm gonna take hey Jack, you know, I don't like you today. I'm taking back your SARs. Yeah. You know, I didn't like the cut of your I don't like that Dalmatian picture sitting above your head. You know, I'm taking away your SARs. Like when you've done it, you've done it.
I'm not going to tell my daughter that. She drew that for me. But yes, so
It's a beautiful picture. I
thank
think it's
you.
cool.
Yeah.
She did it a long time ago. Yeah, I don't know what grade she was in, but yeah. So the some people call it magic money because you're not putting money out. The company's not issuing stock. It is it's a calculation between a start price and an end price. And so, you know, and the consequences are, you know, you get the money and you have to pay taxes on it. So, you know, it benefits, but it's a contract. So, you know, you're obligated if it goes up and someone pushes that trade, like for example, if Fidelity is managing that, or you know, whoever the fund manager is, and you go into their portal and you push a button and say, I want to cash this out, and they've been, you know, issued to you, or you're at the redemption period, then you know that has to be paid. So, and it's in comparison to other options for stock options, you know, it really isn't an option. You're not buying the stock. So, and a lot of times you'll see them combined with a stock option and an appreciation right. So you get kind of the benefit of both, which is to actually purchase the stock or purchase the right for the differential a lot of times. And you make that choice at some point, and then you're stuck with that choice, whether you have what you've received. And some companies will do one on 1 year, one type on 1 year, and we'll do one type in the next year, and just kind of give some variation. And that also helps displace their liability a little bit, as far as cashing out and following the float of the stock price itself. So anyway, you know, different strokes for different folks. It just depends. It depends on the circumstances.
You need to get one of those t-shirts from Michelle, man.
Yes, we're gonna print them up.
Yeah, I think you should. The official legal t-shirt of Shoemaker Law. It depends. So we got a question in here from Matt that ties into this. Here's an example. We start a new company and give SARs to initial team. Can we set 3 to 5 year vesting rights?
Yeah, I mean, you can set the vesting rights and but a lot of times what will happen is, you're granted a grouping of them that vests over time. They act essentially kind of as handcuffs. So, you know, it's employees have to consider, okay, well, if I leave, I have all these rights, whether they're appreciation rights, whether they're options that I'm leaving on the table that I forfeit. And I know I have friends and relatives who have had to consider that. Do they want to leave, or or they wait until, you know, March 10th, for example, on March 11th, that's when they resign because they want to make sure that they got that March 10th distribution, or you know, so because again, it's a contract, right? So once you get it, you have it, and they can't take away the vested ones, right? And so it also can create a very difficult situation if we're talking about culture, right? You have a culture that has purchased a culture that does not do these types of plans, that is purchasing a company that has these types of incentive plans. When you're under the new regime now, you're no longer getting these things that may have been important to you.
Yeah.
And so then you have the legacy people, once they get to the end of the trail, of what they had under the old company that had to be adopted by the new company and be paid out by the new company, then you sometimes see an exodus of employees. And the management's trying to figure out, well, what happened? Well, okay, isn't it readily apparent that it's the people of the acquired company, those are the ones in majority fashion are leaving. More of them are leaving than the people that were there already from the purchasing company. So, you got to think about those kind of things when you're it ties culture and financial and incentives and retention and everything all together. But back to our discussion about merging cultures, what is important to your newly acquired employees? And do you need to continue on with that? Or there's also the potential for differential between what the payout, the value of what you get on an annual basis versus under the new regime versus what you were getting under the old regime. And what a lot of times companies will do is maybe the bonus program is a little more robust with the new people. So there's a lot of times an adjustment. The equilibrium is adjusted so that you net, hopefully net neutral or net positive as far as compensation goes under the new regime.
Oh yeah, that's good. I want to come back to that. But there's a question that came in that is a follow-on question with Matt, and this one really goes to you, Adam. So how do you carry SARs as obligations on the balance sheet and P&L?
You don't, like, you disclose them like if you have CPA prepared financial statements, you disclose their existence, but there's no record of them that exists because they're not, they're not something that would have occurred yet, and the value that was created associated with them you don't recognize in your balance sheet in the first place. Meaning, like, you presumably, like, hey Gary, I'm going to give you $2 in incremental value, that the company grows. You don't actually recognize that value ever on your balance sheet until it's sold. So
Yeah.
they're never put there. They're just disclosed as an item. And typically, if you go to sell the company, that's part of what you're going to disclose too.
So a follow-up question would be, so does that, when the payouts show out as an expense, a cash expense when they're paid out because they're not otherwise on the balance sheet? Okay.
Yeah,
That
it's
makes sense.
it's compensation. Yeah, the only time you ever put something on the only time that you ever put something on the balance sheet that's associated with some form of equity like this is, if you've got some options that actually have some compensatory value associated with them, then you do something with that. But in this case, they don't really have compensatory value in the current year. Like, you're not,
What if do you see companies creating a slush fund on the balance sheet and, maybe restricted cash on the asset side that is for, I mean, it's not really restricted, but it's showing up as being intended to pay out these and future obligations? Or is it more of, no, the cash flow and should be sufficient to cover whatever the obligations are? Because I'm thinking in the context of M&A, I mean, you mentioned the term disclosure, so it would be disclosed, and that potentially the buyers inheriting this liability, if they actually, if it was an assumed liability, but might impact the purchase price if they know that they have this liability that's upcoming. So it would be disclosed in an M&A transaction. But do you see it being this slush fund created on the balance sheet for this purpose?
No, because I mean that would, that because then you're sort of saying, do I have a funded or do I have an unfunded pension? Like, conceptually it behaves the same way, and most pensions unfortunately are unfunded or underfunded relative to, because it would get in the way of, like, holding up operating cash for growing the company that would allow you to pay off the money in the first place. So most companies of our size are going to have an unfunded future obligation that exists, and in most of these cases the triggering event is going to be change in control, so like it would get paid, in other words, like you probably seen Jack, it's like, and now I'm doing the closing statement. you know, you know, funds, funds to seller, and then what the seller's actually going to get after they pay out, X, Y, and Z.
So one thing that well, I'll tell you, I have personal experience on this, and it's a good thing it wasn't shown on the balance sheet because we got zero when the company went down. So, if you are taking a gamble as an employee, on the financial viability of whether the company does it or not, and it's a gamble, but it's just like anything else. If you're, there are no guarantees. But you hit something earlier, Jack, that I thought was really important. And here's go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, to carry on to your point, I mean, I think if a company believes that they're going to be able to pay Gary a lot less because I gave them stock appreciation rights, I think that's a false belief. Like that may get you a little something in the door when you're a brand new company and you're a startup and you just can't afford it. But if you're an otherwise stable company, really it's a strategy to make sure that Gary doesn't leave. But guess what's going to make Gary leave? Hey, dude, guess what? I'm going to need you to take $100,000 a year pay cut. But guess what? If we sell this place at some point in the future, you could make 500.
Woo!
Yeah, Gary's gonna say, well, it sounds like I don't really have a choice. So okay, get the resume together.
Yeah, exactly. The one thing I was going to say, back to the cultural nuances, if you will, for an external thing, where you've got somebody that's got something and somebody that doesn't have something. Part of that due diligence, this is one of those things that just gets eliminated or just missed way too often, is how do you assess cultural compatibility and then doing a bit, like, it's easier to do a benefits analysis. Side here, side there. That's pretty easy. And most people, I think, do that. What I've seen is most people don't do a cultural compatibility assessment of, all right, let's do interviews internally and externally. Let's get the management teams together for a day and a half offsite and go through core values, where we're going, and down to the brass tacks of who's in what seat going forward. Oh. And then doing a thumbs up or thumbs down vote. Are we going to do this deal or not at the end of that day and a half session? I've been through a couple of those when we were doing acquisitions in this private equity firm for our holding company. One of those thumbs up, thumbs down votes, like that day and a half sniffed out massive incompatibility, massive. And especially when it got down to, okay, let's do a 100-day plan. Who's in what seat and what are we doing? Those guys, we're like, we don't want them. We do not want them. And it was, wine and roses up until that point. Oh, this is going to be great. Man, thank God we torpedoed that. And then I also saw one that was extremely successful. And that company is the only surviving thing left from that failed PE firm that went down. That company is the only one, and they decided to keep their name, and it was a multi-generation name out of California. And they're really good people, but man, that exercise was really good. So it's not difficult. You just got to have somebody that knows how to do it. And I can help get you connected with some people. I've done it myself. It's not that difficult, but get the two management teams together and then get somebody to walk you through it, and it'll save you a lot of heartache.
And here's the thing about that is it works until it doesn't work, meaning that you have to have honesty on both sides. And the problem with that is, there's a romance going on, right? And trying to wine and dine people. And you said it was good until, it was happy. But there's two challenges. One is you have to get people comfortable enough to really share how they feel about things so that you can really determine what the culture is. That is, and unmask that, which can be difficult because people may not want to tell how they feel about things. So, to your point, a moment, have a facilitator and have someone who has Jedi mind tricks up their sleeves that can go through an analysis and ask you the same question 4 times to make sure you're consistent with your answer, but make you not realize that you're answering the same question 4 times because of the way it's been asked of you. Stupid things, I mean, serious things, but then some kind of, things you wouldn't think of. This happened. It was the new culture did not have breakfast on Thursday mornings for staff. And there, you would have thought that, oh my gosh, you took away most valuable, one of the wonders of the world from the group. And it was, and all they wanted is like, no, we like having bagels at 8:30 on Thursdays. And okay, but then the more serious and more important things are, okay, management style, and again, reporting and personalities. And, so as you said, when you're putting together what the new structure looks like, is this person the appropriate person to be managing 2 or 3 more people? Or, should we, how does that allocation look? I would also say, as ancillary or adjunct to our discussion, is it doesn't necessarily have to be a merger. It could be that you are acquiring 2 or 3 people from a company that maybe that owner is retired, but is not selling his business. Maybe he doesn't have anything to sell, but you're acquiring people, but it's, more than 2 or 3 or 4 that are coming over, and, that they have their own culture and they're going to bring it over. And so I think there needs to be a good assessment when you are acquiring people, not necessarily through an official merger or an asset purchase or anything else, but making sure that there's simpatico with the 2 cultures.
It's a big deal. Too many people gloss over that one, man, and then they pay a big financial price for doing that. I'm looking at, it's 11:55. I think I want to kind of table employee ownership trusts and worker cooperatives and other options to next week if you guys are open to doing a follow-on.
Yeah.
You guys good with that?
Yeah. There's a lot to talk about, and even the differences between qualified stock options, non-qualified. What does that mean? We've talked about it before of shadow equity. I mean, it's called different things, but basically a bonus program that is, the metrics are based upon the performance of the business as if you were an owner. So, or as if you had equity. So those kind of things we can talk about. We can talk about tax consequences of those things, because we see more of those, which is well, I shouldn't say more of, but it's like, oh, well, we have this, an equity plan. We have these, restricted stock. Well, I shouldn't use that term. That's a term of art, but we issue stock. All it is a bonus program that's based upon as if you own 10% of the business or whatever it may be. And then it's calculated based on what the ownership, the per share or per membership interest unit is worth. And that's what you get paid in bonus, which is ordinary income tax that you're going to be paying. So
yeah. No, that
I went
sounds
way out of my
good.
lane on that one. Yeah, I went way into your lane on
You did
that
good.
one.
You did good, buddy. You did good. And legally, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's plan on doing a follow-up next week on this one because there's still a lot to unpack and keep it simple. So everybody, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. If anybody missed the front end of this, we'll put it up on the BGW CPA YouTube channel later on today. And I know Jack and the Shoemaker gang has a similar thing. So that'll be up. And it's always good to see both of you guys. And I feel so naked and underdressed in just a non-collar t-shirt.
You're doing good, Gary. You're doing good.
All right. See you guys. Have a good day.
Bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
All right. See you. Bye.